Thank you for your patience. We were obviously waiting for the President's speech, so here we are. I have two items at the top for all of you. As we had announced previously, Secretary Kerry departs today for Japan and Indonesia. In Tokyo, he will join Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel for the U.S.-Japan Security Consultative Committee meeting. The last SCC was held in June 2011 in Washington, D.C. The meeting represents the next step in strengthening further the U.S.-Japan alliance, providing an opportunity to build on our already broad and comprehensive bilateral relationship. On October 4th, Secretary Kerry will continue on to Bali, Indonesia, to lead the Department of State delegation to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Ministerial Meeting and to join President Obama for his APEC-related meetings. APEC is the premier forum for facilitating economic growth, cooperation, trade, and investment in the Asia-Pacific region. Promoting trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific remains a key component of the U.S. rebalance policy, and the Secretary will participate in a broad range of multilateral and bilateral meetings with officials from APEC member countries. The second piece I just wanted to touch on is, of course, the shutdown. Secretary Kennedy, Undersecretary Kennedy, sent an email to Department of State employees yesterday afternoon. In that email, he reiterated, and I quote, that department offices, bureaus, and state elements at our posts overseas will continue to function for a limited period of time. This is with the exception of a small number of offices impacted initially, and USAID Administrator Raj Shah sent a similar message to agency staff. There were a couple of additional details in that email as well. We, of course, are not completely conducting business as usual. The Department of State and USAID will not hire any new personnel and is severely constraining spending. This includes avoiding new obligations, sharply curtailing travel and conferences, and avoiding making all but the most essential purchases. With that, let's get to your questions.
Well, logistic. What are the small? And if you've done this in previous briefings, like yesterday or last week, well, a lot of us were.
We did it a little bit yesterday, but
what are the ones that are affected?
We'll get you a specific list, but basically the way that it's categorized, the impacted offices are those that operate with one-year funds that do not have available carryover funds to sustain operations. So they don't have funds from the previous fiscal year, and they are on one-year funding mechanisms. But we'll get you a specific list of that. It's a very minimal number.
But are they ones that affect the average citizen?
Consular offices and things along those lines?
I know those aren't affected, but are they? I mean, I can't think of what they are, but what they might be. But would someone who does not work in this building even know or have reason to know that these offices are not operating as normal?
Well, it depends on the individual, so I certainly wouldn't want to characterize it that way. However, most people who are impacted, most American citizens who are impacted by Department of State programs are Americans living overseas or Americans trying to acquire a passport. Those services, of course, would not be impacted. Obviously, we're taking this day by day, and we'll continue to monitor funds and monitor funding closely and continuously. So in any department, if residual funds become insufficient to maintain operations, the department and USAID will continue activities involving the protection of national security and health and life safety, particularly of U.S. citizens abroad. But obviously, we would have to make decisions as time continues.
Well, recognizing that passports and visa is all self-supporting, basically. If you're an American overseas and you go to an embassy starting today, is there anything that they can, if you don't need that, but you need some other type of help, is there any kind of service that they won't be able to get?
Our embassies and consulates overseas will continue to provide U.S. citizen services, so that's not changing. And our embassies will also remain at near max capacity over the course of time. That's obviously a huge priority for us.
If I'm an American and I get arrested in, I don't know, wherever, country X, will a consular officer still be able to come visit me in jail?
Yes. Okay. Consular officer duties are obviously a key priority for serving American citizens living overseas, and also many of their activities are fee-funded, well, visa and passport issuances, a little
Yeah, but
different than that.
non-fee funded services.
Non-fee
for-
funded consular offices and those activities
open.
are still
Okay.
open, yes, yes.
And just so we're clear, since visas are fee-funded, you're continuing to issue visas as normal, et cetera?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And since consular operations are fee-funded, there's a significantly less chance of a furlough occurring for those departments.
And then one other one on this, you talked, yesterday you talked about, today you said a limited period of time. Yesterday you said you couldn't say how many days it would be that the State Department could continue to function using such additional monies as it has available. Are we to conclude from that that it is a matter of days and not weeks that you think you can do this?
I'm not going to further break down. I mean, if you look at just the budgetary component of it, there are one-year programs, programs that are funded by a one-year program. Obviously, those are the ones that are impacted first. When there are residual funds, they can continue to operate. Programs that have a longer-term funding, they have more bandwidth, of course. But we're monitoring, of course, our spending. That's why we've taken the steps we've taken. So.
Did you mean to leave the inference that it is a matter of days, or could it be hundreds of days, in which case it would be months, or dozens of days, in
I
which case
think
it would be weeks?
we are able, as Pat Kennedy, Undersecretary Pat Kennedy's email made clear, this is for a limited period of time that we can operate at this capacity, but I'm not going to categorize it further because obviously there are program by program spending, and it really depends on each program.
Are programs like the Fulbright affected, the Fulbright scholarship?
Well, right now, only the programs that are in this one-year funding mechanism are impacted. We're happy to get you a list of those, but I don't believe at this point Fulbright is
Or
impacted.
going to, doing their higher studies, whatever it is in the country, how are they affected?
Well, over time, given that this is not sustainable for a long period of time, there certainly could be impacts on a range of programs, but that's a hypothetical at this point. We're obviously taking it day by day.
Yesterday I asked if there were going to be any furloughs. Do you have an answer to that at all?
I'm not going to get into specific numbers, but a minimal amount that would impact the programs that operate with one-year funds.
And why not get into the numbers on that? Why is that going to be the secret?
I'm not planning to get into the numbers. I don't know that I need to provide an explanation.
No, I understand that, but it's just curious why. I mean, it's not like this is national security information.
Sure.
It's not like it's classified. Why not say,
If
well,
there's
it's
a number,
200 people.
if there are specific numbers, I said a minimal number that are impacted by the one-year funded programs, which we're happy to provide you a list of. And if we want to get specific about how many individuals, I'm sure we'll do that.
And just to check the number of employees, is it 70,000? Is that the figure that you State Department works with?
Worldwide, I'd have to double check on that. I mean, you certainly may have a good sense of that, but I'll get you the exact number.
It's a secret.
It is certainly not.
Were there any employees that, let's say, came today and had to leave after 4 hours, like was suggested by some?
Well, again, I referred to just a minimal number impacted by one-year funded programs, but the vast majority of employees reported to work today are here today. Given that we are we are a national security agency and we represent American interests around the world, that's where our staffing levels are at
It's
this
safe
point.
to assume that some people did come to work, spend 2 or 3 hours, and then were asked to go home.
I did not imply that. I think there's a small minimal number that are impacted by the one-year programs. That's beyond that. I don't have specific numbers. Go ahead. Sorry for the delay.
I'm just concerned when you said they'll be continue to function for a time. I know you wouldn't get weeks or days, but if I'm overseas and I need to see somebody at the embassy, I better get myself there right away.
Well, I think I also said that since consular operations are fee-funded, there is significantly less chance of a furlough occurring. So obviously it's a priority. We are visa and passport operations will continue. They're fee-funded, so they'll remain open. So we can certainly reassure Americans living overseas and people who are seeking visas overseas that they can go to the office tomorrow and certainly receive services.
But what a time for a time mean? I mean, for a time could be anything.
Well, I think
what
I
you said.
separated, let me just finish. I separated out that as a consular services, as I said, since consular operations are fee-funded, there is significantly less chance at any point those individuals will be furloughed. And passport and consular services are fee-funded, which means they pay for themselves. So obviously, those operations will continue. Now, we can't predict how long this will continue, so I'm just conveying that we're taking it day by day.
John, the problem is that non-passport and visa services overseas are not fee-funded, or unless you guys are breaking the law, which made passport and visa services fee-funded, and you're using the money from that to fund other parts of American Citizen Services. Are you?
That was not what I was conveying,
Okay,
Matt.
so-
I think I made clear.
So can you go back to the example of someone sitting in a jail someplace? The consular officer who goes to visit that person in jail, there's no fee fund there.
I also think I said in response to your previous question that those services are ongoing.
I understand that, but
Yep.
they wouldn't, because they are not fee funded, unless I've misunderstood.
They will
the
still
law.
be, I'm here today, we're all here today. There are many people who work for the Department of
And
State
if
that
I'm
are not
sitting
in
jail
fee-funded
in
operations.
Botswana or something, I'll be very happy to see your smiling face. come
Perfect.
and,
I will come visit you in Botswana.
But I want to know, what I'm trying to find
Mm-hmm.
out is whether or not those services, those non-fee funded American Citizen Services that are available that were available in full, yesterday,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
are still available and are not threatened after your reserve fund winds down.
Well, they're not threatened now. We don't know how long this will continue. So obviously, our goal and our plan is to maintain our overseas operations. As you know, even when we reduce staffing levels for a range of reasons, we still have consular services. So I think it's safe to assume that that will remain a top priority. I just don't want to get too far ahead of where we are today. But certainly if someone goes tomorrow, if someone goes Thursday, if someone goes Friday, and ongoing for some time, they will receive the same services.
Okay, the problem is for some time, and you just don't know how long that might be.
Well, Matt, I just don't want to get too ahead of where we are now. I think I've conveyed pretty clearly that many services continue. There are only a handful of programs that are impacted immediately. Obviously, if this were to continue for months, then I can't predict beyond that.
The problem is, Jen, is that it is no longer government shutdown is no longer a hypothetical question, and you can't get away from answering questions about it by saying that it is a hypothetical question. So if you're an American overseas and and you have an option of trying to get an appointment for something that is not fee funded Wednesday, or you would wait and do it in a month from now, what should they do?
If
And
that
I don't
is
think
visa and passport issuance,
yeah, but
those services
not fee funded.
will continue. For one of our highest priorities, as I've said, is of course maintaining services overseas. So that will remain, as we're making decisions, a top priority, and we'll continue to discuss this day by day. I can tell you tomorrow, I can tell you the next day, that certainly all of these services would continue.
Can I ask on the, you said that you were looking at curtailing travel and conferences as well. I mean, you said that the Secretary is leaving this afternoon, so I'm assuming that his initial travel, is not going to be affected.
That's correct.
Could you tell me if any of the upcoming meetings at a lower Secretary level have been affected, and who might not be turning up for what conference?
Well, we're making decisions case by case. I don't have anything specific to announce for you at this point, but obviously we're evaluating each element of travel as it's being considered.
She's getting at the Geneva meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, Wendy Sherman and the
No,
and the
there's no
gang
plans
are
for
still
that to be
going
impacted at
Geneva.
this
That
stage.
would not be affected, nor would if this Geneva II Syria conference ever gets its act together. That's the kind of thing that would not be affected. It's lower level.
We're looking at all of this through the scope of what is a national security priority, what is a diplomatic priority, and how we continue to represent U.S. interests around the world and protect American citizens around the world. So decisions will be made through that prism.
We're done with shutdown?
Do you have any more? Okay.
On the question officer. In terms of the secretary's travel or travel of officials from the State Department, is it curtailed, or does it have to follow a certain criteria, or it's not involved in this thing
The
at all?
secretary's travel is not
Secretary's travel,
impacted.
the deputy secretary of state and others.
I think Joe just asked this question.
couldn't hear.
So, and I think I just answered it, but in a short version,
Right.
obviously we are representing American interests overseas. There are key roles that the secretary, the deputy secretary, and certainly other high-level officials play around the Department of State, and they will continue to play those roles and travel and represent our interests overseas. But as you know, there are thousands of employees, and certainly given the circumstances, we're going to evaluate travel as needed.
You could have just said, I refer the gentleman to the answer I gave some moments
I know, but
ago.
I have a special place in my heart for Saeed, so I decided to answer his question again. Go ahead, Jill.
Netanyahu.
Yes.
I presume you watched, or at least you have an idea of what he said today at the UN. Essentially, there were two things. One is absolutely no trust of what Iran is up to, and that they would act alone, Israel would act alone to stop Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. Do you have any response to that? It was quite harsh compared even to what he said.
Well,
his yesterday.
as you know, he just met with the president and with the secretary yesterday, and we are in lockstep agreement that we are not going to allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Nothing has changed about that. In the president's comments post their meeting yesterday, he made clear we were going into any path forward, any diplomatic path forward, with eyes open, that we expect Iran to follow their words with actions, and that's where we stand now.
Right,
So
but
that has not changed.
But he did say that Israel would act alone if necessary. So what's your
Well,
opinion of
they
that?
have also said that before, so that is not a new statement on their part. And we've been clear we're keeping options on the table, and we're not going to allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. But of course, diplomacy is the preferred path, and that's why we're pursuing the path we are, which, as you know, is a part of the discussion just yesterday when the Prime Minister was here meeting with the President and when he was meeting with the Secretary.
I think maybe another way to get to this question is, do you still believe that Israel or Prime Minister Netanyahu himself believes that diplomacy is the preferred path?
Do we
Because-
still believe it is? Yes.
No. Do you still believe that he believes that it is the preferred path?
I'm not going to speak for him or
Well,
make
I'm
a
not-
judgment on what he believes or doesn't believe. I would point you to
Okay.
his remarks
But-
and to the
but when you
government of
say-
Israel
But when you say that you're in lockstep with the Israelis, does that
about
include
preventing Iran
Right.
from
But
acquiring a
does that
nuclear
in-
weapon.
But does that include the preferred path being diplomacy?
Well, I'm not going to speak for what their beliefs are,
So-
and you heard Prime Minister speak just yesterday
Right.
about
But so
this.
you can't say that you know for sure that the Israelis prefer, or that Prime Minister Netanyahu's preferred path on this is diplomatic.
I think no one wants to see Iran acquire a nuclear weapon, and obviously he was speaking to what steps the Israelis are willing to take, which they have spoken to before.
Right, but Jen, one more on exactly to define this.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you're in lockstep. However, he is really harsher when it comes to that. Essentially, he's saying there should be no trust. You can't trust Iran at all. And I know your favorite phrase is eyes open, but still, the United States is, willing to walk into this with eyes open, but at least take a step in that direction. It would appear that Mr. Netanyahu doesn't believe that at all. So there is a difference in the way that you're approaching this.
Well, I can only speak for what our view is and what our position is. And when I said lockstep, what I'm referring to is we agree that we cannot allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. There's agreement on that. The president made clear just yesterday that we would keep options on the table. But certainly we have an obligation and an opportunity to see if there is a path forward. And that's what we're pursuing now.
Do you share Prime Minister Netanyahu's view that Iranian President Rouhani is a wolf in sheep's clothing?
I'm not going to speak to every comment that every foreign leader makes. I think I can speak to what our view is, which is that President Rouhani, there's a new opportunity given his election. We will see if they back up their words with actions, and time will tell. But we have a couple of weeks until the next political directors
So you
meeting.
think it's conceivable that President Rouhani is trustworthy?
Well, we will see if they come to the meeting in a few weeks with a credible proposal, and if we can pursue a path forward.
Well, he compared, Prime Minister, and I'm not asking you, I'm asking what your views are. He suggested that the Iranians are like the North Koreans, which has, as you know, have reached a series of agreements with the United States that the United States subsequently concluded they had, violated, right? So what he is clearly saying is he doesn't think you can trust Rouhani. Do you think it is possible you can trust Rouhani?
If we did not think a path forward was possible, we wouldn't be pursuing a path forward. So, and obviously he is one of the proponents of that.
Did he repeat this idea that Israel would be prepared to go it alone in the meetings yesterday with Secretary Kerry? And if so, what was Secretary Kerry's advice on that?
I don't have any more specifics than what we've already read out from the meetings yesterday, but they've said it frequently publicly, so I don't think it would be a surprise if they did.
So what is, I don't remember, sorry, what has been your advice in the past when they've said they are prepared to go it alone?
Well, Secretary Kerry has conveyed what he's conveyed publicly, which is we don't know if this will work. No plan is better than a bad plan, but we are going to see what is possible here. There are steps the Iranians need to take.
Is the United States position in agreement with Israel that they have the right to go it alone if they want to?
Well, that has been our position for some time.
What is it? No plan is better than a bad plan?
Yes.
I don't get it.
No agreement with the Iranians is
Oh,
better than a
no
bad agreement.
No agreement with, really? No agreement with the Iranians is better than a bad agreement? Okay. All right.
Jennifer, the Prime Minister went a step further today. He said that Rouhani when Rouhani was in power, Americans were killed, Jews were killed, and so on. That's quite an accusation. Do you concur with him?
We've seen his comments. I'm not sure I have much more to add on his comments. Go ahead, Josh.
Do you believe that Iran currently has a nuclear weapons program?
Well, we believe they are building toward that. We certainly have seen, the Secretary has talked about, development at Fordo and other facilities, and certainly that's our concern, and we're concerned about where it's headed. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this
So you
now.
believe they have the intent to develop a nuclear weapon?
If we didn't believe there was the potential intent, I don't think
Not
we would be.
potential intent, the actual intent.
Well, there's been if there wasn't concern about it, Josh, we wouldn't be talking about it now.
So you're not 100% sure that
I'm not going to play this word game with you. I think if
It's not a
we
word
didn't
game.
think that Iran had plans to, had potential intention to, we wouldn't be having this conversation now.
Because previous cabinet level officials, including Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, said many times they believe that Iran intends and is pursuing a nuclear weapon. So now you're saying there's a potential
I'm not
intent
changing our
that-
position. If we didn't think that was the plan, we wouldn't be having this conversation with the international community now about how to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear
Okay,
weapon.
so I just want to be clear. So you believe that they intend to build a nuclear weapon, not that there's potential or there's concern about it. Which
That
is
has
it?
been the long history there. If we didn't think there was an opening for a different path, we wouldn't be pursuing it now.
So based on that belief, then the statements by the Iranian president and foreign minister this week were not truthful, right? They said they have no intent.
Josh, what we said last week, and I'm happy to repeat, is that we saw a different kind of presentation, a different kind of proposal last week. We see an opening, but they need to back up their words with actions. So we will see what proposal they come with in the next 2 weeks. This is perhaps the best diplomatic opening we've had in some time, and that's why we're pursuing it, and we'll see where it lands.
On the proposal, can I just ask, Cathy Ashton said at the UN after the meeting that everyone, the P5+1, had asked for some advance notice before Geneva of what the Iranian proposal is, so that everyone could discuss it before you actually get to the table in Geneva. Have you any idea how that might come, or if indeed Foreign Minister Zarif agreed to that?
I don't know. I'm happy to check if there's more, but it may be something that you may need to get from Ashton's office. But I'll check on that for you.
Clarify the thing about Fordo, just
Yeah.
for the record.
Sure,
so people
absolutely.
don't get that confused. So Fordo is under IEA inspections, correct?
It is, but Iran remains in non-compliance with its obligation to suspend all enrichment activity there on an immediate basis. So obviously there are steps more that can be taken.
Right. So what did the Secretary mean when he talked about opening it up? He meant stopping enrichment-related activities?
That's the step that they could take, yes.
And I got some serious stuff, unless we have more.
Okay, anyone else have Iran?
Can I just follow up? It's sort of Iran related.
Okay.
The administration's policy, as stated by the president, is that Iran has the right to a civil nuclear program, assuming this rapprochement goes well. Is that policy? Can that policy also be understood to apply to other rogue states like North Korea, for instance?
I know it's applicable to Iran, and that's obviously.
So it's
what
only
we're having-
Iran that he was talking about.
No, I don't.
Space...
I don't want to. I don't want to qualify beyond that. Obviously, we've talked about that for some time. That they could develop a peaceful program that's applicable to some other places as well.
On the issue of the trust in the statements made by the Iranian leaders and so on, the fact that he said that the supreme leader gave him the fatwa, the fact that he said that we have no intention whatsoever in making a nuclear bomb, does that mitigate in any way your fear and sort of elevate the trust? The level of
Well,
trust?
we want to see them back up their action, their words with action, Saeed. So we'll see where it goes moving forward. Syria? Did you want to go to Syria, Arshad?
Yeah, just, I don't know if you saw the comments by Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov suggesting that Geneva II may not happen in November, and seeming to blame the United States for that.
Well, I would point all of you and the Russian foreign minister to the comments by President Jarba just last week, where he reaffirmed his willingness to engage in a future Geneva conference. They obviously speak for their intentions. We're continuing to work with them and are in close touch with them, but those are comments he made just last week about their intentions.
So why do you think Foreign Minister Lavrov is saying we had hoped our Western partners who undertook to bring the opposition to the conference could do it quite quickly, but they were unable to do it quickly, and I don't know whether they'll be able to do it by mid-November?
Well, I can't ascribe reasons for that other than to convey that what's accurate is that the opposition has said they're open to attending. So we don't have a date yet, that is true, but I'd point you just to the opposition's own comments on it. Josh? Oh,
Just on that, were you aware at any point that the Russians had the Russians convinced the regime to assemble a delegation? Did there ever come a point in time where there was a government delegation, identified and ready to go to Geneva?
I'm not aware of
specific.
specific names. I know that there have been many different reports and different comments that have been made. But
No. Well, I'm asking because Lavrov's comments were pretty clear that it's the U.S. and its allies who are unable to get the bickering opposition to get together and to create a delegation that could represent them all at the. So I'm just wanting to know if you are aware if the Russians ever succeeded in doing, their part to this, and that is assembling a government delegation to go to.
Well, that's obviously what we're all working towards. I have not seen them publicly announce a list. I'm not aware of them providing a final list either.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
There were
Josh.
reports that the State Department intervened to prevent General Salam Idris, the head of the Supreme Military Command, from visiting Washington. Were those reports accurate?
I haven't seen those reports. I'm not
It
sure.
was in a Foreign Policy magazine.
Never heard of it. Just kidding.
I don't work there anymore. Doesn't bother me.
I am not aware of their plan. I know there were rumors for some time about possible visits. I'm not aware of.
Would you welcome hosting General Idris here at the State Department for meetings?
I don't think
He has made clear his intention that he wants to visit. And
I don't think he's announced plans to visit, so I'm not going to get into a hypothetical. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done on the ground, and I'm not aware of a planned visit at this
can you take
stage.
the question as to whether or not the report is true that the State Department intervened to prevent him from coming?
I'm happy to look in and see if there's more to prepare for you. Yes, more to provide
It's
to you.
important for the Syrian people.
Are you
now.
aware of the statement made today by Amran al-Zabi, the Syrian foreign minister, that basically suggesting that Bashar al-Assad is entitled to run for a third term?
Is entitled to run for a third term?
For a third term in June 2014, and do you have any comment on that?
I have not seen the statement, but I can say that we see no place for Assad in future Syria. We would like to see him go as soon as possible. That has not changed, so that would be our position.
Is that likely to be a condition that is part of any kind of Geneva peace conference? Would that be placed as a precondition?
Well, you're familiar with what the ground rules are, I suppose I can call them, for a conference, which is mutual consent, and both sides have to agree who would be a part of a transitional government. And it's clear the opposition certainly wouldn't support Assad being a part of that. And our position hasn't changed, that we'd like to see him go.
And going back to Jarba's statement that you just cited, do you believe that the opposition today can actually coherently represent the whole opposition in Syria in a peace conference?
We do. On Syria still? Okay.
On that point, do you believe that the opposition and the Syrian National Coalition, which you've recognized as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people, should have a say in the agreement over the securing and destruction of the Syria's chemical weapons stockpile?
Should they have a role in what way?
Well, they control huge swaths of territory, and they are the legitimate representative of the Syrian people. Should they be included in these discussions?
Well, as you know, where we are is there's already a process underway
Without
to.
them?
Well, I think everybody supports the goal of eliminating chemical weapons from Syria, and so that process is underway. We've been in close consultation with the opposition, so I don't think it would be accurate to say they haven't been engaged in it or a part of it.
They're opposed
but of
to
course, it goes through the UN Security Council, which they're not a member of, as you know. But we've been consulting with them closely along the way.
Are you still convinced that President Assad's days are numbered?
Yes.
Just a really big number.
Our position has not changed.
You can't tell us how many days.
I cannot.
I need to go back to Iran.
Okay.
Just 1 second. And it basically picks up on Josh's question, and that is, and I know you don't have an answer for it, so I would appeal to you to maybe take the question.
Okay.
If you believe that there is a chance that the Iranians, the new leadership, might be serious about this, does it concern you at all that their opening gambit, their opening position is that they have never been trying to develop a nuclear weapon, and that you and your pals in Europe and in Israel are just completely wrong and have been completely wrong for the last 15 years? Is that problematic?
Well, Matt, we know, for example, Fordo that we just talked about, that was a covert,
Right.
under the ground facility
But what I'm
for
asking
several
you
years.
to, what I'm asking you to ask around the building about is if it is if you think that it is a problem, and if you think that it hurts the trustworthiness of your new Iranian interlocutors, the fact that they are basically saying that the premise of your entire Iran policy through successive administrations has been completely incorrect and wrong. And I don't think that that the administration is in a position to say that it doesn't believe that Iran isn't trying to develop nuclear weapons. I mean, maybe it is, but I highly doubt it. But if that is the case, if your position remains the same, then they're lying, at least according to you. And that would, I don't know, to some people, suggest that they might be less than trustworthy in going forward.
Well, Matt, a great deal of the conversations, negotiations happen behind the scenes, as you know, and there have been several rounds in Almaty, technical talks. We're waiting for a credible response to our proposal, which obviously addresses exactly the development of nuclear weapons, and so we'll see what happens in a few weeks.
Can I, unless there's more in Iran, can I take us on a Google Earth spin around the globe?
Sure. Are there any more on Iran or Syria? Okay.
On Iran, was there any other contact with the Iranians after the phone call between the president and Rouhani?
Not that I'm aware of, but as you know, we've been in touch, of course, for some time. We've had communications with them, of course, around technical talks and other talks. So, not that I'm aware of, but I don't know.
Jeff, do you have an update on the fighting between opposition forces and extremists that's been reported in border areas of Syria?
I don't have a specific update, but we can get you guys a ground game update if that's helpful on what's happening on the ground. Absolutely.
I wasn't here yesterday, so I don't know if this came up in the briefing. I don't even know if it had happened when the briefing had occurred yet, but Venezuela.
It had not happened.
It had not happened. So you have not yet had anything to say about it?
We said something to some who asked last evening, but
I know the embassy,
I will give you an update of where things stand at this point.
And then just as well as an update on where things stand, this would seem to signal the death knell for the rapprochement that the secretary got started.
This is the second rapprochement use this briefing. It's impressive.
First death knell.
Yeah,
First
that's
death
true.
knell.
In my chally up here.
Anyway, is that dead now because of this latest move by them? And are you planning to reciprocate?
Well, let me give you a brief update, which we actually didn't have last evening. So, the Venezuelan government delivered a diplomatic note to our embassy in Caracas last night, informing us that they had declared the chargé, the political officer, and the consular officer persona non grata. They were given 48 hours to leave the country. We completely reject the Venezuelan government's allegations of U.S. government involvement in any type of conspiracy to destabilize the Venezuelan government. We reject the specific claims against 3 members of our embassy. In accordance with the Vienna Convention on diplomatic relations and on consular relations, the United States may take reciprocal action. We're still considering what actions we might take.
Have they left? Do you know?
I'm not aware of their exact status. This obviously just happened overnight last night.
The Venezuela have an ambassador or charge here?
A chargé.
When you say the specific claims against the 3, those are the espionage claims?
There were a range of claims issued.
Including espionage. I just want to make
We,
sure
of
that you're
course,
denying
yes,
that.
we
Yeah.
reject all claims.
And as to the broader
Question?
rapprochement issue?
Well, Matt, obviously we've had a relationship with Venezuela that we've been working on for some time. We're not going to give up on those efforts, but
Really?
clearly,
If I was in a relationship with some entity that had been going this badly for that time, I would think it might be time to call it quits.
Matt, let's keep your relationship.
States have lower standards than individuals do. So, in other words, it's not over. You're still willing to work
this
with them.
happened last night.
know.
Obviously, we're considering actions we're going to take in response. I don't think that's
Okay.
a positive step, but of course, we look at the longer term horizon.
Do
here.
you know when the last round or the last contact there was in the previous rapprochement? I believe there was at least one meeting between Roberta Jacobson and the foreign minister.
The last contact at that level?
Right.
I don't-
In the context of what was discussed between the secretary and the foreign minister in Guatemala.
I'm happy to check on that for you, and we'll get a note around to all of you. Go ahead, Jill.
Can we get a little more specific about the charges? Because one of the things that they specifically said was that these diplomats allegedly were involved in some type of energy power outage, creating that. Can you just, specifically
So
address
this was
that?
related to, I believe, their travel to Bolivar State. That was part of the discussion, I think, that you're referring to, or part of the accusations. They were there conducting normal diplomatic engagement, as we've said in the past, and should come as no surprise. We, of course, maintain regular contacts across the Venezuelan political spectrum, and we maintain a broad perspective on Venezuela, and travel frequently, of course. That's what diplomats do. So there was nothing out of the ordinary about that, and that was part of their accusations.
So in other words, the power went out when they arrived? Is that what happened?
Well, that may have been what happened, but the accusation that there was anything out of the normal about their travel is just inaccurate. Go ahead.
Can you give us an update on the status of Peter Wilcox, the big Greenpeace fellow who was arrested, or he's in jail in Russia, but I don't think charges have been filed. Is there any status update on what that?
I don't think I have anything with me, but we're happy to check on that for you, if
Okay,
that's
great.
helpful,
Thank
following
you.
the briefing. Okay, let's do a couple more.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Iraq.
Iraq?
I know you
Okay.
mentioned yesterday, you sort of condemned the spike in violence, but also the Maliki government appealed to all those governments that aid the rebels in Syria with arms to stop doing that, because these arms are the ones that are finding their way to Iraq, and these bombs that are finding their way to Iraq, and the car bombs and so on. Do you feel sympathy with your ally, the Maliki government, and the people that you work with there? And are you doing anything to sort of stem the flow of arms that find their way to Iraq?
I'd have to look more closely at his comments and their specific meaning or intention. If you are asking me about the overflow, of course, you know what our concern is about that. But beyond that, I just have to look a little more closely at his comments.
Any kind of intelligence or reports that you may have suggest that a lot of arms find their way from Syria to Iraq?
I don't have anything on that for you, Saeed. Go ahead.
Can I switch topics to Morocco? I wonder if you have any reactions to the arrest and detention of Ali Al-Nuzli, the editor of Lacombe news outlet. He was arrested last week after writing an article that talks about Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb. There's no official charges against him, but the lead prosecutor said that he was, quote, making a clear invitation to direct incitement and taking part in acts of terrorism in the Moroccan kingdom. That while international organizations such as Amnesty are calling for his immediate and conditionless release. Do you have a reaction to the incident?
I don't. I'm not familiar with that specific case. I'm happy to check on it. Of course, you know that we are always concerned about treatment of journalists and freedom of speech around the world, and that's something we speak about frequently. But why don't I talk to our team who works on Morocco and see if there's more we can share with you?
Sure.
Okay.
How long was, on the record, how long was the Secretary's meeting with Sudanese Foreign Ministry yesterday?
I believe it was about 40 minutes.
Thank you.
I have a question on Greece.
Okay.
As you maybe know, the Greek government put in jail some leading members of the Nazi organization Golden Dawn. And according to the public prosecutor, these people, and I quote, are dangerous for the security of the country and also for the democracy. Do you have any comment on the arrest? And also, if you can tell us, what is the view of the State Department of this Nazi organization?
Well, we are deeply concerned by and condemn statements and actions ascribed to the Golden Dawn Party that reflect or seek to incite xenophobia, hostility toward minorities, and anti-Semitism. We welcome the strong position taken by the Greek government against extremist violence. For more details, of course, we would refer you to the Greek authorities.
Nothing on the actual detention of the leader?
Well, we welcome the strong position taken by the Greek government.
So you do not believe in free speech, then?
Well, we were citing the specific actions and steps that have been taken and the long history of this group. Go ahead.
Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb is claiming responsibility for some terrorist attacks in Mali. As you explained, after the elections in Mali, the United States has restored assistance, but not military assistance. So how is it that you see Malian authorities reestablishing security and confronting Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb if you are not restoring military assistance?
You know, Scott, I'll have to check on this for you. I know, obviously, we've had a lot of recent announcements regarding assistance to Mali, but on the military component, I just have to see what the latest update is.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, go ahead. Or you, both of you can go. Go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about Sudan.
Okay.
President Bashir came out today and talked about the fuel price hikes which have unleashed these protests, in which we've seen a number of deaths, and what was described by yourself as a brutal crackdown. I wondered, he said that he explained it by saying that it was because otherwise he feared the Sudanese economy could collapse. Is that the US reading of the situation? Is the economy so fragile in Sudan that this action was in fact justified to raise these fuel prices?
Well, we spoke to this a little bit yesterday, and our position hasn't changed regarding our condemning of the brutal crackdown on protesters, condemning the violence by government forces and protesters. And we were also further alarmed by the reports that the Sudanese government has arrested or detained civil society activists, shut down independent media, and restricted access to the internet and cell phone networks. So our position remains that we urge the government to allow its citizens full and unhindered access to the internet and respect press freedoms, and to bring an end to the violence. In terms of his comments and his justification, I'd have to check with our team on that, but I don't believe our concern about what's been happening there has changed.
Jen, do you have any greater clarity on why the Secretary didn't raise that set of issues in yesterday's meeting?
Not beyond what I told you yesterday.
And then,
Very quickly. Isn't foreign military financing cut off by the shutdown?
I do have a little bit on that, too, I can tell you about. One moment. So I mentioned, of course, the status of our programs, but there are some broader financing programs, to your point, Josh, that could be impacted because in the absence of a CR, we have no FY 2014 foreign military financing, IMET programs, and peacekeeping operations funds to obligate. So hence the challenge. So the processing, and as well as the processing of foreign military sales, which will continue, but the pace may be slowed over time because of furloughs in the military service. So those are, of course, some of the impacts broadly on where we stand with our budgetary challenges in Congress.
For the Egypt FMF, that was still 2013 money.
That is exactly right, but we don't have a 2014 CR at this point. So.
The Egypt money that's on hold, just one second.
Yeah.
The Egypt money that's on hold, that's still under review. That could still be released even during the shutdown.
The
review is ongoing, right?
The review is ongoing.
But right now it's not
of course,
flowing.
the end of the fiscal year was yesterday, so we did recently obligate the remaining FY 2013, which would expire on September 13th, unless obligated. However, it is still the president still has flexibility here. We still have the ability to control kind of how this is used. So
can you explain that? So you gave them the $585 million.
we don't. It doesn't go to the Egyptian government. It was obligated because yesterday was the end of the fiscal year. But this fund.
It's more than a
I
week
got
ago.
this, guys. I got
It's
this.
more than a week
So
ago.
Let me just finish, Josh.
Yeah.
The type of obligation does not result in funds being put under contract. So this is funds. This is funds that that it doesn't mean we still maintain control over how FMF and other assistance will be spent. It's just that we had to obligate the money because of the end of the fiscal year
So
yesterday.
you're obligating it to whom?
Well, it goes to, let's see, I believe I actually have something on this. Sure, go ahead.
Can
My
I hear the answer
understanding.
to my question before you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a
Thank you.
related thing, so if you don't mind, I'm
Oh.
going to say it.
We'll continue.
Unless
We'll
you-
continue here.
So
Go ahead, Arshad.
The way-
We're
the way-
not finishing, Josh. Go ahead.
the way that it was explained to me was the need to obligate it had no effect on what you might ultimately do with the money because those decisions had not yet been made, and that, in fact, you needed to obligate the money in part so that if you wanted to terminate assistance, you would have money available to pay for the termination
For the
costs.
wind-up, that's exactly right.
Okay.
But no decision has been made about that. It still is under review. It typically goes to a federal account, but it's not there yet. And it either way, we still would approve purchases.
The federal account being the Egyptian government's bank account in New York.
Well, it's an account that we control and we approve purchases for.
I see.
Your Federal Reserve?
My understanding is it's not there yet.
Right.
But it's going to get there.
That would be the next step, but it's not there yet.
How much was it?
It was 584.
584. And that's the remaining amount from the federal, from FY 2013.
Right, and as we've talked about before in the last couple of months, broadly speaking, if a decision were to be made about funding that would impact it, there would be wind up spending that would need to be used because of programs or obligations being part of the way through.
So the remainder of what must have been around $500 million or $600 million was spent, or
well, that was money. You mean
because the total sum is about 1.1 billion.
It's a little higher than that, but that was previously obligated before. This was the chunk that was left over. In terms of how much of that has been actually spent, I'd have to check on that. Some of that is harder to track, but sure.
Then will the U.S. aids to the Syrian refugees and the Syrian opposition be affected by the shutdown?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll check and see if those specific programs would be. Okay.
So the Bahraini government has said that some of these 50 activists who have been jailed on Sunday for security offenses were also convicted of spying for Iran and had planned vandalism and rioting with the backing of the of the Iranian government. Lawyers for the, well, some rights activists, however, say that some of these people were, in fact, human rights campaigners. Do you have any view on whether the Bahraini government is correct in alleging that these people were spying for Iran and planning violence? Or, to the contrary, do you actually think some of these people were rights activists who were not doing those things?
We just aren't going to and don't have more details on the case, so I would refer you to them.
Are you going to look into it? I mean, is DRL going to look into this?
I'm happy to. I know there have been some other allegations about the specific case in terms of, respecting the detainees' rights to due process and to a transparent judicial proceedings. And there have been reports by some defendants that they were mistreated while in detention, and certainly we have concerns about that. But in terms of the specific allegations, I don't have any more on that. If there's more,
Can you
I'm
take
sure
it?
I'll see if
You'll
there's
ask.
more to share.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.